Welcome to Biweekly Bites. This is a series about engineering discussions which we define as conversations which lead to a decision with practical outcomes and lasting consequences for a tech product. This is your host, Slava Rudnitsky.
And this is your host, Dima Malenko. And this is the second episode in the series. In the first one, we talked about preparation to an engineering discussion, and now we discuss what happens at the very start of the discussion meeting.
In case all people accepted your invitation and came in time, of course.
Because starting a productive engineering discussion is more than just the fancy icebreakers or warmers.
So, let's start with tip 1, and I would say that this is setting up the context and double-checking people actually know what they're supposed to know. It kind of refers to the last tip from the previous episode. You might go through the core documents briefly or ask 3 to 4 clarification questions to get everyone synced up. In my experience, people tend to ignore prep materials that you send, so it might be a good idea to give an overview of all the resources that they received in their inboxes.
Second tip would be to reiterate the goal of the discussion and the expected outcomes. Make sure to emphasize that you are there to make a decision, not to just exchange opinions or converse. Focus on the goal can greatly help in steering the conversation if it ever takes an unproductive turn.
You could also try voicing out the ways to achieve your goals. Agendas are often misleading because they include questions to be discussed with timing, but they don't really focus on the outcomes or methods of decision making. So, if you'd like to make a joint effort and vote, or just hear ideas and delegate the decision to yourself or anyone else, it's best to settle this procedure from the very beginning. So apart from the points in the agenda, also discuss the mechanisms, the mechanics, how it's going to work.
Yeah, that's a good one. Another tip would be that it takes time to get people's creative juices flowing. And if the discussion involves brainstorming or generation of new ideas, do not jump straight into that one. Plan for warming up activity or a conversation to get participants immersed in the problem or the domain you are working in and get them comfortable with speaking up their mind. Depending on how familiar they are with one another, it can take up to 30 minutes or even more in certain situations. But if it were that easy, we would not have had this conversation.
Yep. And I think one of the biggest fails that I personally face is that people come late. Unfortunately, but they do. Most of my best planned meetings start at least 5, sometimes up to 15 minutes late. And I feel as if all I can do is just to send a reminder or call a person who is late and to hear an excuse and then keep waiting. It could be beneficial to prepare for a useful discussion or an activity that is not directly to the main goal of the meeting. For instance, our Ukrainian teachers would use warm-up questions to get us talking. Some of my friends just prefer to chit-chat about life and do the small talk. That depends on the situation, but you'd better be prepared that people will be late.
Right. Productive discussions greatly depend on people being present, and people may come in thinking about something else or just unfocused or distracted. And at the initial stages of discussion meeting, it would be great to assess and detect if people are distracted. If people fail to engage in conversation and impede overall progress of the discussion, it may be better to stop the meeting altogether and regroup at a later time.
And to prepare better, there are 2 points of reference. The first one is a list of icebreakers and warmers you could use while waiting.
My resource I want to suggest to you is a little-known framework for effective collaboration in groups, which is called the Core Protocols. It was developed by a former engineering director at Microsoft, and I find that any variation of the check-in protocol described in there particularly useful during the kickoff stage of important meetings, not just the discussions.
And that would be it for the kickoff stage of engineering discussions, one bite-sized piece at a time.
Ciao.